Welcome to What's Left, a weekly political discussion challenging the mainstream left. My name is Andy Lipson. I'm joined by Jessica here as a co-host of What's Left. Eduardo and Kenny are away for the week. Kenny's in Mexico, Eduardo's in Colombia. So it's just going to be us two interviewing our guest today. What's Left is online at what-s-left.webnode.com. You can find the link to our blog in the episode notes. And please subscribe, rate, review, turn on your notifications, and share your favorite episodes. And jot down our information wherever you find this episode. So as I said before, we are joined by a special guest who we've actually had before. His name is James Deschenes, a father, family man, and an ELD teacher in LA Unified School District. And we've interviewed James before, and we kind of wanted to come back to, well, I guess I want to say a little bit about that interview, James. First of all, welcome.
Thank you, Andy. Thank you, Jessica.
Yeah. And first off, James kind of contacted us because he had been listening to What's Left. And we're a bunch of Marxists over here, and James definitely hails more from that conservative side.
Yeah.
But he really liked what we were doing, and he said we had helped him kind of break out of some of the isolation in the sense that he was crazy, for questioning COVID.
Mm-hmm.
And since that time, James, it's really just been great to get to know you. You've been a big part for me of this idea of a left-right divide, of how we can actually join. And even though you and I aren't going to see eye to eye on questions, I just have an immense trust of you and faith in your principles. And know you're going to be honest with me. And I remember even during my own crisis with the school district admission and the San Francisco Unified, you were somebody who I talked to about what I was going through. And so I really value the fact that we interviewed you way back when, then you reached out to us. But it's great that on a few occasions, some of these things turn into friendships, like getting to know Jessica and getting to know Jake. And James, I'm really honored to consider you a friend now.
Thank you. Thank you so much. The feeling is absolutely mutual. It's been a great experience to get to know you and Eduardo and everybody in the What's Left family.
Yeah.
And just thank you right back at you, Andy. Thank you so much.
Yeah. And Jessica, I know I mentioned this before the episode, but one of the reasons there's actually a connection between our interview with James and you, because if you look at that episode, the first letter response on that was from Jay Holming. And you had written to us after seeing the episode where we interviewed James and told us about you being like a college professor, kind of isolated. And that's what caused us to reach out to you and started our conversations that led to our interview of you in June. So actually, there's a lot of things going on here that are synchronicity or something.
Yeah. I can't believe it's been a year since those first interviews that I think we were pretty close together.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Does it feel longer or shorter?
Well, shorter, but then when you think about all the changes we've all gone through,
Yes.
I guess it feels like lifetimes ago.
That's true. You're right. I feel like a lot of change has happened. So much change compared to that. Feels like a short time period. So James, you had reached out to me about giving us an update. But I first want to go back to my overview of what I remember from what you had said in your first interview. And obviously you can correct anything I get wrong. Number one, you had a real question of the COVID narrative from the jump. It was very much connected to your strong Catholic views and to your views, and learning about Catholicism was when you questioned, about abortion, and you were like, and you saw that stuff connected to eugenics. You saw a history of eugenics and an attempt to depopulate the planet, and you were like, wait, you started to look at what was going on with COVID, like, and the way it was being responded to, like a depopulation agenda. That was the biggest thing that you didn't want to be right, but that's what you were afraid of. One of the things that I thought was so great about what you had said was you didn't necessarily know what the truth was, but you knew you were being lied to. And you knew that the things they were saying about PCR tests, another thing that you thought that was a big thing for you. I remember you showed a video or a picture of the actual PCR test, and written on it was saying for research use only, not for diagnostic. It's
Yes,
like,
that's right.
wait, it's actually on the thing. You can't use it this way. And they're using it way millions and millions of times. So you were like, this doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
And the other thing was, you were less at that time for you. I don't remember as being as much about the digital stuff, about the fourth industrial revolution. That was something you were becoming kind of aware of, but your biggest reasons for being against this was a lie. It was destroying education, and you thought the deeper lie was a depopulation agenda that you were seeing. And then there were other things you said that I think, though, that did, and maybe I can show a quote later, that did show that you were starting to see that this was leading to us down a very dark road in education, a very impersonal road. And so that would be my summary of would describe kind of some of the highlights from that last interview. Oh, and I think we also asked you about, like, are you afraid for your job? And at the time, you weren't willing to do it because you weren't willing to be masked. You didn't like the mask stuff. You didn't like the testing, and of course the vaccinations wasn't a mandate at that time, but you felt it was coming, and you weren't willing to teach under those conditions. And you still had a job, but you worried about what things were going to be like in August as we returned.
Yes.
I think that's what we're going to kind of talk about today.
Yes, that's a good recap of the whole thing. The only thing I would add about the you touched upon the eugenics and that kind of historical background was something that I had read into some authors maybe about maybe 15 years or so ago, that were not all Catholic authors, but there were some Catholic authors that had gone into, like Margaret Sanger and Galton and these, like that historical movement, Malthus and all that the world is overpopulated, and so when I saw the historical through line and saw some of the videos like TED Talks from Bill Gates and things like that, was that they make no bones about it. They're right out there saying it, and they might fudge their words a very little bit, maybe tweak it a little bit, but you'd have to basically want to just roll over and accept anything the man says, and just want to give him the benefit of the doubt of everything the guy says, if you were going to just look the other way. And I just said, wait a minute, let's he's actually saying this. If we can he said something like to the effect of, if we can do a really good job with vaccines, we can bring, you've seen that quote, right?
Yeah.
Bring it down, whatever he said, the several billion. But the other thing, just one quick point about that also, I think I mentioned her to you before, Andy. Obianuju Ekeosha from Nigeria. She's amazing, and when she's done so much work on how she calls it like the new colonialism of Africa, and how the West is taking over, has really tried to take over Africa again with their policies of birth control and abortion and the whole thing just forced upon them. And she's just a major force in fighting against Gates. And it was through her videos that I saw like what he had done with his organization in India with the paralyzing of kids. What it was, I think it was like tetanus shots or something. I could have it confused. But the two countries it was India and Kenya, where a lot of damage was done. And this was not just like pre-COVID. This was going on a long time ago too. So, at least back in the early 2000s, I would say. So that just put it, well, okay, this is who they are. And now we can't just turn a blind eye because, Africa's so poor or whatever, and now it's here. and what are we going to do about it now? So that's all it was. I just wanted to kind of tie that in and give respect to Obi Anuju Ekiosha for really waking me up with that.
Mm-hmm. And Jessica, do you have any either questions or comments to make? Or should I?
No, I just kind of want to hear like what journey you've been on the past year since we left.
Some of the questions I'd like to ask James are not just the technical questions of what he's been through the district, but like, how do you feel like how have you changed in that year since the interview?
We went through that initial year of pandemic and scamdemic and the whole thing. So we've been through that. And now for this, COVID part 2 year, we're going through it again. It has these different ways to try to navigate through work and family life and the whole changes with commerce and jobs and shopping and all of that. And they keep throwing these new curveballs at us to try to deal with it. So the worst part of the shutdown year, the 4 of us in my family, we got through it, I think, really, really well. Thankfully. We were very upset during that time with the way most of the Catholic archdiocese kind of just rolled over to the COVID narrative and shut down the churches. And you had priests with rubber gloves on handing out the Eucharist and things like that. And that was really, really troubling to me as trying to be faithful Catholic. So, well, what is this? Do you believe in this as real, or are you playing with us? Or are you just, it would be like, it was, on one level, do you think, are they just doing this because they think we're so afraid, like a little kid say, look, I looked under the bed and there's no monsters under there, so it's safe, go to sleep now. I say, we're going to put these on and put a face mask on and we're going to like throw the host at you almost. So that's how bad it was at some churches. So, that was really bothersome. And, having to watch it on TV when everything was shut down, like, that was like, this is not right. So anyway, as time went on, we found a church where the priest was not on board with it at all, but he had to do his dance around the LA was going to shut him down if we didn't at least pretend to wear the masks and everything. And this church continued to give communion on the tongue, where other churches refused to do that. So we got through this, and that was like finding like a place to be grounded and go each week. And we saw that this church was growing. That the other churches were kind of like the average age is like 70, at some of them. And this church, you see, like, you say, wow, did I go back in time to like 1955 or something? And, there's big families, there's young people there. And that's a surprising thing too, to go to church and see young people there in a Catholic church. So that was, I think, a grounding spot for us, and I knew other people that I work with that I see there as well. And the 4 of us really loved that. And then we find out that in the new school year, they're going to do this, like, Andy, Jessica, they're going to do the vaccine mandate. So the reason I brought that up about the church was we had that good sense of, we feel good here. And this is going to be a place that we can continue to be at. So we're deciding what to do about the kids. Both my son and daughter are in high school. And I know we're not going to do the vaccine. At the start of this school year, 2021 in August, I told my principal I didn't want to go back wearing the mask or do the PCR test, and I wasn't going to do any vaccine mandate. So tell me what I need to do. I want to get a religious accommodation and so forth. And she says, well, we don't really have that. We're not going to do the vaccine mandate, so you're just going to have to come back and wear the mask. I said, well, I'm not going to do it. Like I told you last spring when you let me stay online, I'm not going to do that. I can't do that. And so she just ignored my emails. And at the start of the school year, my wife was just like, look, pick your battles. The vaccine is most important. And so she didn't have a problem with the mask. And so she just went back to her elementary job and wore the mask, and she was okay with the testing. But she would only do the saliva test. And same thing for my kids. They only agreed to do the saliva test. That seemed like it was a compromise, right? So I was going to be a holdout. And then in August, I just said, I want to go to this online academy, August 2021, right? The start of the school year. And the principal says, well, I don't have any information on that. I don't have any other information for you. You need to show up at work. And I said, well, I'm not going to show up until I find out an answer one way or another. And then it went like 2 weeks where I just stayed home. And it was weird. That was weird because you know me, Andy. I'm a guy that likes to get up and go to work every day, and I don't rock the boat, and I just think, I'm not always the type of person in more than 20 years with LA Unified. I was never like banging on the principal's door to go complain about something. I wasn't hounding the chapter chair over, some, what I figured just ignore it, right? So, but this was, I can't do it. So my wife was pretty nervous, like, you're being really stubborn, just what's the big deal? It's just a mask. But to me, it just wasn't. So I was really struggling with this, and my son and daughter agreed with me. They didn't like them either, but at the same time, they didn't want to be online anymore, and they wanted to be with their friends. So that's where we were at as like the four of us, So then while I was doing the holdout thing, and I'm thinking, how am I going to get paid for these 2 weeks or whatever? Am I, is this going to come out of my sick pay, whatever? So they in LAUSD, they sent out an email and said, everyone must be vaccinated by October 15th, right? That was the line. And so my wife says, what are we going to do? So we agreed that we weren't going to get it, number one, and our kids weren't going to get it. That was number one. But my wife Thelma was, she won't mind me saying this, she was struggling with it. She's like, if we don't do it, we're going to lose our job. And she was really afraid. I said, we're not going to lose our job. We're not going to lose our job. So we had a lot of really serious conversations. I won't go into it too much because she should be able to, give her part. So to say about that too. But the long and short of it is, Andy, against my better sense, I still wanted to hold out, but Thelma and I talked about it, and she said, I think you ought to pick your battle. At least go back to show your principal that it's kind of like, good faith. You're not a nut job. Agree, do the spit test and wear the mask. So I had a friend of mine who was a former chapter chair, another guy that we both Catholics and stuff. We were talking, so we were talking about that, and he was just like, just go back and wear the mask, and then and I was like, not that simple. Anyway, I agreed to go back, and the principal was just happy. Okay, come back. If you wear the mask. And then my wife and I said, we'll just draw the line at the vaccine. So I went back in like late August, and everybody was like happy. Hey, you're back. Oh, you didn't go online and all that. And a lot of people didn't know about, I guess, my stance about the vaccine. Maybe some of them thought that I was like COVID phobic or really afraid of, that. And so like, oh, we're so glad you're back. It isn't so bad, And it sounds like, okay, well, they don't really know. I'm glad you're back, Jim. So I'm back, and days are getting closer to October 15th, and just that's when it really got touchy for Thelma and I, because she's like, I don't know. I think I'm just going to go do it. I think I'm going to do it. I said, don't do it. Don't do it. It's not safe. And all those other, I'm not touching upon why I didn't want to do it. It wasn't strictly from a religious standpoint, although that was what I felt was the foundation of that gave me the sense of this is not who I am. It doesn't mean that I'm like a Christian Scientist or something that wouldn't do a blood transfusion or something like that. It was more like, you're asking me to do something that I'm not sure about and hasn't been proven to me to be beneficial in any way, and you're ordering me to do that. And that's how I felt about the masks too. You're ordering me to do something that has no proven medical beneficent for it, right? And benefit. And the same thing with the PCR test, which I thought was just a total fraud. So as it got closer, I had to fill out new paperwork. So we got a wonderful letter from our parish priest, and it was all laid out the reasons why we can say, in good conscience, to not go along with a vaccine in any way. It had to do with the research involving the fetal cells. It was well written. It was a good letter, and we thought this will be our backup. We shouldn't have to present any kind of religious test or anything. I think that is really, really bogus, that they would try to make us try to, prove your sincerity in some way, which that really went against my feelings as well. I thought, okay, well, in for a penny, in for a pound, I'll go with this. Passed in the paperwork, we hear nothing. And then out of the blue, my wife gets an acceptance letter. We're happy, October, you're going to be online. And I still hadn't heard. And then right before the deadline, October 15th, and I had been like getting stuff out of my classroom for like all of the month of September, just like farming it out to other teachers that needed stuff. Or my buddy who also taught ELD, his room was kind of like the room where everybody put all their stuff. And so he said, so I kept on, he knew where I stood on the vaccine and everything. And I kept on sending like the projector and all different things, boxes of paper and stuff back to his room. He said, gee, I feel like we're breaking up or something. You're giving me back all the stuff, and that was it. But so by the time the 15th rolled, I still hadn't heard. Said, turn in your keys, turn in your roll book, and turn in your laptop. So at the 11th hour, I get an email that says, oh, keep your laptop. And I thought, well, that's kind of weird, So all right, I'll keep the laptop. And so the 15th comes. I say goodbye to a few people. I turn in my key, turn in my roll book, and I leave. I left very high. I wasn't wheeling out like a big cart full of stuff. I left with basically, just the laptop under my arm, and I said, see you later. And because that was the good thing about jettisoning, all of this stuff, and not have to worry about it too. The stuff that I did enjoy having, like certain teachers' guides for like Animal Farm and stuff, I hung on to that and it was in the trunk of my car. So traveling light was a good thing. So I don't know what's going on, and no one's telling me anything. So I'm happy that Thelma's got her online gig. They're not going to mess with my kids. They decided to let the kids stay on campus and not get vaccinated. So that was good. So then so a friend of mine that was going through the same thing, we both got, I guess a bunch of teachers got this email that said, the district is preparing to remove you from employment or something like that. You must attend this pre-disciplinary hearing. And that was like in October, like October 20th. And I said, gee, I've applied for this reasonable accommodation, religious exemption and all that, not hearing anything. So I get an email from this like regional superintendent. I had met him before when I was at Dean, and his office was like near our 9th grade campus. So I kind of knew the guy, at least he probably knew my name. So he sent me this email, And it says, our records show that you haven't been vaccinated. We want to encourage you to remain safe and do what you need to do to keep, our LAUSD family safe. And so I thought, it can't hurt. So I sent him an email and explained what was going on with me. And I said, I don't want to get this vaccine, but I put in for this exemption. What's going on? Maybe if you know something, have some advice for me. Well, he emailed me back and he said, thanks for letting me know this. I didn't know that you were going through this. This is the guy that's handling your case. So I thought, that can't hurt. So I sent an email, said, what's going on? And nothing, no answer. So now I'm Andy, the stress, as you know, we're going through it, the stress was starting to, really, really add up, right? And so I was talking to my friend who was also at my school, and she was also going through it as well. And it's like the night before the disciplinary hearing. So I talked to my friend who was the chapter chair. He was going to show up with me at the Zoom meeting the next day with the discipline group. And so my friend says to me, she said, you know what I'm going to do? She said, you should do this too. Get all your paperwork, all your letters again, and everything that they sent, and you send it out one more time to everybody that you've ever gotten an email from that downtown, squad. And so I said, that's what I did. So I sent it out and I sent it out. And this time I sent it with a letter that I wrote based on what this lawyer that we had been in contact with. He basically said, you tell them to go pound sand. They can't take your job away. And it was really good. He fired me up. And it was through that group, California Educators for Medical Freedom. I want to give them a lot of credit because at that time, Andy, if we didn't have that group and their Sunday night Zoom meetings, I can't go further without saying how much your group and this group meant to me, because I'd be looking at the chat and I say, I work with that person, and Thelma says, oh, and she come over and looked at the chat and she's like, I work with that person. And so immediately there was that sense of isolation started to feel like, I'm not alone, right? I think we talked about that last year as well, how you feel just like, you're the only one that feels that way. And so anyway, I sent out the email, and at this point, I can't sleep. It's the night before this meeting, disciplinary meeting, and so forth. I had the laptop open right here on this table where I was, and you know how you see the little red dot when you get an email, or like little thing. So I was just ready to go to bed, and I looked. I said it's like 11:30 at night, and I looked. I said, oh well. I checked the email. I said, dear Mr. Deschenes, we've received your information. We have accepted your religious reasonable accommodation based on sincerely held religious beliefs. It's pending whether a job will be available in the online academy. Let us know if this is acceptable to you. So I said, sure. So the next morning I go, and my friend Larry meets me in the Zoom, and these two women from downtown, very cordial, very nice, and they start reading this spiel of some kind. Maybe you kind of know what it's like, Andy. They just read this like format of, I can't remember what it was, but it was just of, because you won't do what we tell you to do, we're going to now move forward to remove you from the district. And she went through all that. And do you have anything to say in your defense? And I said, well, yes, I do. I received an email from this person from the Sincerely Held Religious Beliefs Committee. They have a title, right? So they measure your sincerity. I don't know how, but maybe they have a pipeline to to somebody upstairs, right? So they measure your sincerity somehow. And I said, yes, I didn't say that to them, by the way. But I said, yes, I received this. They're going to offer me a job online. And they said, if a job becomes available, will you accept it? And I said, yes, I will. And it was like they exhaled, they both smiled, and they went, this meeting is over, Mr. Deschenes. Good luck with your new position. And would you send us that email, forward it to me now? I said, sure. And I send it right off. And now is it. This meeting is over. And then my friend, the former chapter chair, he's like chatting to them. I'm like, what are you doing chatting with them? No, this meeting is over, right? And so they were like thanking him for coming and all this stuff. And he's like, thank you. That was a really good meeting. And I'm like, I want to get out of here. I'm sick of this. So then we were chatting, doing a follow-up, and he was just trying to schmooze to get a little inside baseball or something. But he said, Jim, when they go through and they read that formal complaint against you, he said that means they are not kidding about removing someone from the district. And he was saying that from past experience as a chapter chair, that's what he had seen them do before, and that's where that came. So then, and that was it. You guys probably want to cut out about 20 minutes of this, Andy, from the final product, but that anyway, that was the big moment. And then it was go through training. I have to tell you, the training that they put us through to get on board with City of Angels and online learning and all that stuff. You'd come away from the training thinking, do they really want us to succeed? Or do they want something else to happen? You feel like they want you to just roll up your sleeve and say, enough of this. Point me to the pharmacy, because I've had it with this. So, thankfully, Thelma and I are going through this together, and we can chat about it and talk about it, and so that helped, that we could give like after action review of the training and say, what are we supposed to do with this? How are we supposed to do all this paperwork? And then that was basically it. They gave me an 8th grade class. I'm credentialed in English and social studies, but I taught all of the 8th grade subjects. When I say taught, say, loosely, because science, and I'm comfortable with science, Andy, but I'm not a credentialed science teacher, like yourself, and math. I used to joke with my students, they wouldn't let me even carry a math textbook, basically. But it was, you're learning, and you do your best with whatever YouTube has to offer. But basically, it was just online with Edgenuity. And when they say independent studies, if the kids were not geared to working on their own independently with some kind of pretty solid work ethic, like get up in the morning and do your work and quit at a decent time, not quit by 9:30, but work into the afternoon to do it. Many kids just surrendered. They just surrendered to it. But all in all, this year with the teaching, I just tried to build the relationships with them in as light a way and as a compassionate way as I could, figuring what they had been through after 2 years of this. And some of them, I gathered that maybe the families were afraid of COVID, so they kept the kids home. I didn't pry, so I didn't really know too much, but no one ever really said that, like, oh, my parents keep me home because they're against the vaccine. I just never asked about it, so maybe it was. And I didn't really give a lot of information about why, I was online. I just said that I had been transferred to, the online academy. And then we're at kind of a spot here now where out of 500 teachers, approximately 500 teachers who are teaching online, 220 didn't get offered positions in the new thematic online academies. And
well, what I would say, because that's going to be kind of the second half of what I'd like to talk about these academies and things like that.
Yeah.
I'd like, you went through a lot.
Yeah. Sorry.
And as we're light interviewers here, so we neither me or Jessica is going to interrupt much, but
I hope there's something useful in
no,
there.
there's
no,
actually a
that's
lot
great.
for me I want to go through, and maybe true for you, Jessica.
Well,
My
can I just
starting-
ask a clarifying question before? I feel like that whatever you're going to ask is going to be big.
Yeah.
So I just want to make sure I'm 100% understanding this. So had you already been teaching at the online academy while the shutdowns were happening? Or you were just teaching like your regular position online?
That's, yeah, when the March 2020 big shutdown happened, when we went from in-person to everybody go home, here's your laptop, kids all got a computer and teach from home. I was actually the 9th grade dean that year. So I was deaning from home. So it wasn't, it was kind of weird. The main thing we had to deal with was Zoom bombing, and that was a big rash of horrible things for a while, until the teachers figure out that you could actually, turn off the settings, or to make it. So it was bad. So that was, I had to do it. So a lot of calling home, but other than that, there wasn't much. As that initial shutdown in spring of 2020, yeah, and the initial shutdown of spring of 2020, we were all from home, right?
Yeah.
And I even taught summer school online that summer, but that spring, it was just, I was basically calling kids' parents who the kids had just checked out and weren't going to Zoom anymore. A lot of kids at the school, Andy, too, it's such a, and Jessica from teaching college too, the social aspect is such a big thing. To be without that is, is awful. And that's why my son and daughter too didn't like about that too. They missed their friends so much. We tried to compensate with other things. The sports was still going on. Their water polo, their swimming was still going on. Later, that was taken away from them by the city because they kicked out the kids that didn't want to be vaxxed. That was bad because that hurt a lot.
Well, yeah, and then the part two, just clarifying, was I was just going to ask. So from the like bureaucratic view, this transfer to the online academy was them providing an accommodation because of your religious exemption.
Yeah.
Okay,
Mm-hmm.
got it.
Yeah, and other people got medical exemptions, and there were some people. And Jessica, I think it was you mentioned the other day about the common law approach. Was it? No, maybe that was Sandra the other day on the Zoom.
I know a lot of people have used that.
And there were some teachers that I came across that went the strict common law approach, and I think that they were the ones that ended up just completely being fired and had to fight their way back in another way. My hat is off to them. That was brave to do that. I think that had I been braver, I would have been on that, because I don't like the idea of having to ask anybody to prove their sincerity when it comes to their their spiritual or non-spiritual outlook on something, right? How can you measure it? How can you ask somebody to do that? And then fall of 2021 was when it really started to get heavy, and that's what I talked with. That brings us up to where back again to that beginning of this school year, where they said, no, can't stay home anymore. You got to come here. You got to wear the mask. You got to do the testing, the non-diagnostic testing.
Right.
I still have that picture on my phone.
Well, I am going to go back to your story a little bit through things that I thought were significant. And actually, I'm going to talk about the stuff you mentioned about the church that you found, because we've been talking about outreach, Brandy and I, and Workers and Students for Choice, and trying to figure out what's happening? Is there an audience for opposition to the mandates and to digital IDs and to surveillance? Basically, I'll characterize it as just all this crap around fourth industrial revolution. And I hear your story about your church that's growing, and it suggests to me that there's a larger audience than I think, because like you said, all those other stale churches that are just going with the program and being institutionalized in the same way politics has been institutionalized and education has been institutionalized into these calcified areas of fear and compliance and harm. Like our schools now are doing harm to children in a way that's like direct, because they're putting, I think, something that's very dangerous into them, and saying you have to have this in you if you're going to come to our school, or even if you are going to be online in some schools. But the fact that your church is growing and younger people going to it, that actually was to me a pretty meaningful story. And I'm really glad you started there. I didn't actually expect you to start there, but it tells me that there's people who are looking for places to go that aren't going to be, so with this program. So I did want to note that, even though that goes back earlier in your story. Jessica, I don't know if there was some other stuff, but I want to not just take up all it.
Yeah, I have a few questions, but I'm also really eager to just get to the part about the academy and everything, because I feel like that's going to shed a lot of light on all of this fourth industrial revolution stuff, but just the future of education beyond, not that our individual positions aren't important, but some of that bigger stuff. But I guess one question that's on my mind, just because of I've heard when we had pretty much the same, I think it was October 15th or 16th, like almost exact same deadline up in Washington State. And so I knew a lot of people on campus, just because I was the one, trying to organize everybody together and hold protests and get information and stuff like that. A lot of those people had a really, really similar experience to you in terms of the exemption process, if that was the route that they chose to go down, or actually common law as well, was just being ignored. Mm-hmm. And then, till like the 11th hour, right? Yeah. Like for this huge thing. And then just being passed around from person to person. Like it just became clear that nobody knew what was going on. Nobody knew what the process was. There's just no transparency, no organization, nothing. And even right now, I'm going through like a very smaller version of this for a couple of classes that I'm supposed to teach online this summer. And I turned in my exemption request and I just haven't heard anything. Like they just ignore you. I got, even just trying to get like the form, I had to go to like 5 different people and they all gave me different, answers in terms of how to go about it. And I just am wondering to what degree you think that system, because it's not like they didn't know they were going to do a mandate. I mean, this was like months and months of lead up. And I know like school districts and university campuses are big places, but I mean, my God, like they knew what they were going to deal with. Like they surely knew that not 100% of people were going to want to take this vaccine. So I guess I'm just wondering, like, to what degree do you think that the process, as disorganized and terrible and just lack of accountability wise, like, do you think that that's by design or just sort of a natural? Like, I'm not asking like, oh, is it like a conspiracy that they're just, but I don't know. It's just, it seems to have been everybody's experience. And it just makes me think, and hearing you kind of go through your story, and it's just really upsetting too, just thinking about you and so many people just, and Andy went through this too, right? Like just the process itself is punishment, like let alone the fact that at the end of the line, you might actually lose your entire livelihood. But like the lead up alone is just awful.
This is This is a really great question. I've thought about this. My gut feeling is that they had their script, right? And if a few people involved in enacting the script have a few pages that didn't make it out of the copier, well, then it still works into their favor in a way, because they're going to have to wing it or improvise something. And, hey, that's okay. I just wonder if, let's say, at a meeting, it was like, it's okay if you drop a few emails. Let them sweat. So how much of that was planned? I think either way, it fits into their plan. We want these people to be injecting themselves, so we know that we have to go through this dog and pony show, and if but we don't have to make it super comfortable for them, right? So that's what I think it was. Let's not make it super comfortable for them, and some of them, we're going to need them anyway for the online gizmos that we've got coming down there, and so they've proven that they can withstand this virtual reality. I don't know. Yeah, that's what it is. But did I kind of answer that? I'm
totally, and I actually think it's like a great parallel to some of the stuff we're hopefully going to get to with the online future of education, because with that stuff, right, like it's like, and we've talked about it from a lot of angles on this show, like when school districts or individual schools or even like individual classes or students like fail, it's only them that suffer, right? Like it actually, from a systematic view, I mean, whether you view it as collateral damage or like helpful data in some cases, I always think of just like, the 4IR, like when people say like, oh, like, but the technology is like not there yet to do everything they want to do. It's, from one angle, it doesn't really matter. It's like something goes wrong with your bank account, you try to call in, right? And you get rerouted through the automatic thing and you can't get a person. Like the only person that suffers in that situation and has to deal with the consequences is you. Like it doesn't matter for the bank. It doesn't matter for the system, right? Like it's you that suffers. So I actually think there's kind of a parallel there, to the broader objective of this whole
I think
web of frauds.
I think the question you're asking, Jessica, is a very big question. We can probably spend an episode on about the nature of bureaucracy, and the nature of bureaucracy in what I would say the capitalist state, or what I would. This is a dictatorship. I believe it's a dictatorship, bourgeoisie. I don't think we live under democracy, but I do think, because that's what happened in my situation as well, is the reason that I got spit out of the system was because I expressed open opposition to what they were doing, and I was saying it out loud. So I took more the common law approach, but I didn't cite common law, but I took a common law like opposition to what was happening to me, and I publicized it among my colleagues, because there are other teachers. In fact, one of my best friends at work, she didn't sign the very same thing I refused to sign, but she was at work, and then she ended up retiring, but they just didn't touch her because they only dealt with me because I made a deal about it. And so I think bureaucracies are just, people are just trained within it to say, you must identify people who are not going to work within the gears of this machine and get them out. And particularly now with COVID, it has reinforced the idea that there's things that you should not be putting sand or little monkey wrenches in the machine. You got to get all those things out, because the machine is a machine of safety, and the machine is a machine of getting people into the lane of vax, digital this, QR code that. And if you aren't prepared to be in that machine, you got to go, because you're threatening the rest of us. So the COVID narrative has only reinforced what was already existing before. And I do think, Jessica, the analogy of us me delivering an F to a student is that same kind of thing. It's that same. I'm part of that same machine. When I say, well, you just didn't fit here, and sorry, and that's the very same system that I'm a part of. That's the way that I turn the gear and spit people out when I'm kind of saying, well, I can't. You didn't turn your work in. You did it. I don't know what happened. All I know is it didn't match up to these particular specs. And that I do believe that's how we all get institutionalized.
Yeah. That's a great point, Andy. Let me just jump on that a little bit. I found myself through the online world being much more lenient about leaving the assignments open longer, and just think, why do I have to close it down Friday at midnight? I'm just going to leave it open, and say, okay, can you get it in there? Just go ahead and do it. And I would send messages, say, you know what? I decided to reopen that unit. It's, just turn it in. It's basically saying, just turn it in at this point, and then some of them do. This is, I guess we'll probably get into this in a little bit, but the toll that it's taking on everyone involved with this kind of educational world we're in, you wonder, and also look at the way we've been sold the great idea of convenience through all of this. You can do all of this online. You think back a decade or so ago, even more, like 20 years, I remember when I was joking with a friend that I didn't know if I wanted to trust direct deposit. Right? So I wanted to be old school and walk in with my check and see them actually, handle it, but I got over that. And then everything just now, well, look what you can do with your phone. And I say, oh, I'll never do that. I'll never do banking with my phone. And, it doesn't seem secure. And then now, just like, the lemmings are walking, just marching, and I'm one of them too. It's convenience. And we have let them in to our lives to such a degree. I like what you were saying the other night on the Zoom about the 1 day a week detoxing from electronics. And I really want to do that. And I like to do it more than that, and try to somehow take back some of our independence, take back some of our sense that we don't need to live this way, but people think you're just a Luddite if you do that. How did my dad work for a company for all of those years, and somehow he didn't need a phone, right? My mom knew that he was going to come tromping up the stairs at 4:30. So why do we have to have this, this constant, what would you call it, like an ankle bracelet in our pocket?
Monitoring.
Life tracker.
Yeah. I do want to move on to the academy, because and maybe I'll use the quote from your last one as well.
Sorry, I was rambling, by the way.
No. But the other thing I want to talk about is the discussion. You didn't go into the details of the discussion between you and your wife on differences over where to draw a line, but that's a similar thing that Brandy and I've had to navigate throughout all of this, even though we're largely on the same direction. And I certainly have learned, well, I'm not going to say, what I have come to is whatever line I was going to, once I was married and once I was committed in the relationship, even that was even true before I got married to Brandy, I did start to come to the belief that the decision of that line is just not my own. It is also my partner, and it's part of our decision about the full course of our life because of the financial implications like that. So that's just what I've come to. And so whatever decision I made when I drew my line, I had to check with my wife, my person who I love, about it, because if she had not been comfortable with me doing it, I wouldn't have done it, or I would have done it differently. To the point where, and I would have negotiated with her, I would have argued with her, but out of that argument would have had to come some kind of consensus, some kind of compromise, which wasn't going to be just what Andy would want to do. And so I want to say that about that, because I think that's really a part of a relationship. And I think it's something everyone's having to deal with in this thing, because they have loved ones who agree with them, but don't necessarily agree about where that line is. And that's not an easy thing to navigate, and it can create some strain. But I also, in my case with Brandy, I think it created trust, because we did it together. And I don't know if she knows how much, for me, I was really like monitoring myself in relationship to her. But I was very much like conscious of, I've got to keep always checking with Brandy to see if she's okay with some of these moves I'm making. And that was an important part. So I wanted to say that, because it was really meaningful to hear that part of your story as well, even though you didn't get to the details.
Yep.
I think that's 100% right, Andy. But I also, just from, somebody who's like not married, but in a long-term relationship, I also think I know this is not what you meant, but when you say like you have to check with somebody else, I think it's also just for anybody out there watching who maybe wasn't on the same page as their partner. You should never make a decision for your body that you don't want to make, to please somebody, no matter how much you love them. So
I mean, the fact is that if Brandy and I weren't going in the rough same direction, this moment is a crowbar in relationships. It just opens a crowbar up in things. And so the only reason that I can say that is because I know we were going in the same direction, but we might have different lines along it. But if I felt like we weren't going in the same direction, it's a different thing. I don't know if I have this ring on.
Yeah, I don't think there's a ton of couples out there who are super split, but I know there are a few, because I know a few personally. But that's a different episode.
Yes.
Anyway, academies.
Yeah. So I guess one thing I would say is, or ask is, you are not in the academy yet. It's a job to come, or you are there right now?
No, I have been this year since October 20th, 22nd, when they gave me that that okay to go ahead. So since October, late October, and currently right now, what they did, there's a school, probably San Francisco and other major cities have them. It's like there's a school called City of Angels. And what it was an independent studies. It's been around for a long time in LAUSD, where like child actors would go to, or something like that, where they just would go on a Friday and pass in their work to a teacher. The teacher would just sign off on it, and the kid would go about his way. And for some kids, that can be a great way to go through school, right? Avoid the GED route, and some kids are mature and high school is boring for them, or they feel like they're wasting their time. Maybe they're already working, and so there's lots of reasons to have something like that. Well, when the mandate was coming in the fall, including for kids 12 and up, the online school, City of Angels, had to add teachers, right? Because it just exploded. There were like 16,000 kids, from what I'm told, my numbers are correct, 16,000 kids this year in the so-called online virtual academies. And there's 6 of them in 6 geographic areas. And I'm actually teaching my wife and I actually teaching in an academy. We're the total furthest away from the actual geographic area as we could be, which it doesn't matter, right? So in the last month, they decided that they were going to change the academies. Instead of number them 1 through 6. They're going to have 6 thematic academies like STEAM, business and entrepreneur, arts and entertainment, computer science, world languages and international studies. That's 5. There's one more that I can't think of at the moment. But so there's 6 of them, and they actually they were letting people believe, the teachers in the academies this year, that your jobs were safe for the coming new year because we've got funding for 2 years with the thematic academies, and your accommodations are going to be respected. And then on May 13th, they sent out letters, and my wife and I got acceptance letters. So there were, like, of the 500 teachers, approximately 370 were awarded positions, I guess, for want of a better word, awarded positions in the new thematic academies. And then like 220 teachers were told. And that's the language that gets infuriating, I think, because the letter said to them words to the effect of, although we have granted you your reasonable accommodation, gee, too bad, we don't think there's going to be a position for you. And they're rightfully very upset and going through a real hard time, real hard time, like we all were in the fall. What's going to happen? Are they going to let us have a job? So at the time being, like my wife and I were talking about it, saying like, okay, for the time being, we're in the lifeboat, but that lifeboat can be tipped over. And the other day in a meeting, one teacher who was given a position, she said, well, how secure is my position? And the administrator, who was very, I think, has tried her best to help people out through the interactive process and all that, she said, well, we still have to do norm day in the fall. And kind of just left it at that. So if the numbers are there, the numbers are there. But see, the district did, I think, a smart move from their point of view. They've postponed the vaccines for the students, the mandate, until July 2023. So I think a lot of parents just figure, well, the kid doesn't have to do it, might as well just send him back in person. He'd rather be in person anyway, be with his friends, be with her friends. And the way the online program is, I talked to many parents, and some parents have been very honest with me when I said to them, they say, well, why is my child failing in this online program? And I say, well, because they're not doing the work. I said, I sent you many emails about that, and I sent you progress reports. I said, don't you monitor their work? The lady got indignant, and she says, I don't have time to monitor their work. I said, well, so that's your job. I said, well, I have 32 kids to monitor their work, and I'm sending you emails to help me out. I said, well, I don't have time to read emails, let alone monitor the work. So he's going back in person anyway. So there's a lot of that too. That's the aspect of it, that it isn't all it's cracked up to be.
There's a lot to go into here. And Jessica, I figured, where do you want to start? Because my concern, or some of my questions about the virtual school, it sounds like a new thing they're doing. It sounds like a new direction they're opening up, like a flower they're opening up as a possibility for families. And now they're calling them not numbers, but academies. So they're trying to create this virtual opening to catch people in. My questions are not, and concerns are not so much over employment or not, although I'm sure workers are afraid of that. Jessica, what are questions you might want to start with in terms of the academy, or thoughts you have about it?
I guess I want to know if you think that this academy system is the type of thing that's kind of paving the way forward for what looks like is going to be kind of the future of education. I mean, I don't know anything about it beyond what you know, we've covered in the past hour or so, but yeah, like even just like the word academy, like it sounds very elite, and it sounds kind of like it's potentially targeting or including like families that, you know, maybe don't have the same level of access as some of the parents who put their kids back in person. So I don't know if this is how they kind of frame it, but it sounds like it fits in very well with the sort of like, yes, inclusive access and convenience that you talked about, right? Like you can be anywhere in the world.
Yeah.
And yet I'm guessing it's very like every online education experience, it's highly impersonal and automated, and I'm guessing probably doesn't stimulate the level of critical thinking and certainly not joy that you probably did in your in-person classroom.
Yes, that's it, Jessica, in a nutshell. I don't know what to add about that. They do. I think some of the kids, even if they think they're in a thematic academy, you know, do they are they under the impression that if they're in arts and entertainment, it's going to be like musical comedy all day? You know, they're going to have to do still do their math and their science and their core subjects, and the thematic academy is basically a couple of electives that will probably be geared towards that subject that they, I guess, have an affinity for, or maybe they love, or you know. So I thought my wife and I were deciding because they gave us a choice actually. Um, pick your favorite online academy, and maybe that's where you're going to end up teaching. So my wife chose STEAM, and she got in that one, and I chose it too, kind of figuring that they need an English teacher in STEAM, and maybe those would be the most serious kids. If they're in STEAM, they'll be more academically, um, you know, enthusiastic, I guess.
Right. And that's science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, right? Yeah. And those are pathways. And in your opinion, because you know what I'm thinking now, I honestly am wondering now when I heard that change of the date for the vaccination program, like when it was August 2022, when this California was talking about it, because I do believe that LAUSD, the direction LAUSD is going, is really the future. They're the train that runs the course of California education, and I think in many ways the national trends we're going to see in education. Although Dallas, I think, and Texas has got some stuff going on as well. But it makes me think, particularly given what you're saying, like they're still struggling to get this virtual school program working. Number one, I believe the district is actually committed to it. I'd want to get your assessment of that. Do you believe the district is committed to this virtual program and is planning on trying to build it in time, like over time? And number two, part of me thinks that the actual change of by changing the date by which they're saying kids are going to be mandated for vax, gives them more time to build in the virtual infrastructure. Because when they bring down the vaccine hammer next time, that's going to push a bunch of kids back into that program, and they're going to want to have built it out. So this gives them more time for that in many ways. And I hadn't really thought about this before, because I had seen some of the changes of the vax mandates as kind of just in relationship to push and shove around people having questions about the vaccines and how much they were accepting them. But now I'm starting to see it in relationship to their own timeline for building in this infrastructure that ironically they're building with teachers who refuse to be vaxxed, which I think is so fucking
cruel
diabolical.
Yes. That's a strange thing. So it's like we're we're helping to what? We're helping Mao on his long march, by paving the road or something. I don't know. I can't come up with the analogy, but this is just so super strange. And then how does it tie in, you guys, with the potential for, lockdown 3.0 because of, zombie apocalypse or monkeypox or whatever kind of nonsense they're going to try to because let's face it, anybody with a laptop can be their virtual academy teacher. That's their faculty. It doesn't have to be the religious nut sitting here. It can be, it can be anybody's. Okay, we are all a virtual academy now. Again, like they tried out the first year of the madness, and I think you're right, Andy. With they're ironing out the bugs using the rebels, to iron it out. I don't know. I do get the sense, this is just anecdotal from talking to parents with my class this year. There's still reasons other than COVID that kids might be better off at home. Like some parents said, it's just like too difficult for us to, maybe they're co-parenting or something, and it's too difficult for them because of work schedules to actually bring their kids to school. I don't know how realistic that is, perhaps, but maybe it is. Maybe some kids have to take a bus for, in LA, if you're dependent on a bus to get anywhere, that's chancy at best. You might be on the bus for 2 hours. My son has a friend that comes to my son's school all the way from Koreatown up to the valley, and that young man is on the bus 2 hours to get to my son's school. And then I've talked to parents that say they didn't. Their neighborhood school was handling fights and other things like that. So and then other kids. One parent told me how their daughter had too many problems with kids, bullying her and things. It was just better to stay home. The mom felt more comfortable with her child being home. So I guess there's other, I guess from our conversation, we look at it all has to do with the vax and the thing they call the virus. But there's other reasons too.
I think too, like there's probably a increasing sector of or percentage of kids, especially the younger ones coming up, who after 2+ years of being ripped away from a social life now like feel super afraid of, like, whether because their parents or whoever has fearmongered them, or just because, like, if you haven't been with friends for 2 years, suddenly it conditions you to be like happier, not happier, but the technology is very addicting. And even at the college level, like I do have some students who are just like, no, like the online is so much better for me. Like I can stay home in my pajamas and I can practice self-care, and I'm I don't really want to go be with people anyway. I don't like people, and it's like, well, no wonder. I mean, that's what they've been conditioning everybody to be like.
Oh.
Hi, Thelma.
Hello, everybody.
Hello there.
Andy and Jessica, come on. There's it.
Hi, Thelma.
Here's we're burning, and I was talking about her in our everything about.
I think I know. Good, nice to meet you, everybody.
You too.
You too.
I'm glad you put yourself on camera for here.
The teacher next door, and I crash her third grade class all the time.
Yes. He wants to teach what I teach.
I couldn't do it.
Bye.
Good to meet you.
Bye. Nice to meet you.
Let's see. How do we want to start this up? So I know what Jessica had asked, because James, you were talking about. We were all basically agreeing, seemingly, that that there's something ironically diabolical about these virtual academies forming, and I think you agreed that LA is committing to this direction. Is that true?
Well, I'm told that they have 2 years of funding for it. So, yeah, that's what I hear
Yeah.
It's not like I get told any inside scoop or anything.
And I think the thing that Jessica was saying, well, maybe Jessica, if you want to try to once again summarize the thing about the kind of like how they get people to kind of go along with this. Do you want to try to say it again, or I can ask it in a different way?
I think I was just talking about the conditioning, especially of children and young people, getting them more comfortable with getting their education through a screen as opposed to in person, and even liking that, kind of like if you can, what is it? If you can get your, if the oppressor can get the oppressed to not only be like disempowered, but to actually like that disempowerment, whatever, the quote's better than I'm saying, then that's sort of like the ultimate subjugation, right? And I feel like that's kind of what they're doing successfully with some kids who just would rather do it online.
Yeah, it's insidious in that way, and you could think how whoever the oppressor is, it can take many forms, right? Entertainment, sports, pornography, over-the-counter medication. How much of a lockdown do you think would we have been so susceptible to having them shove us into our homes if I noticed that there's no beer shortage. There's a baby formula shortage, right? There's all of this, but there seems to be all through this there was never any beer or alcohol
or shutdowns. They didn't even close the liquor stores.
That's right. They shut down anything else. So yeah, you get to, I think they're moving to try to get people, like you said, Jessica, to like Stockholm syndrome or kind, right? Like learn to feel like, oh, this is for my own good. Or look, I can stay home. It's for my own good. How?
Or even for you, like, who doesn't want to get the vaccination, getting people like you to say like, oh, like, thank you so much for giving me this accommodation. Like, thank gosh.
Yeah. And I'm glad you brought that up too, because Thelma and I have had that kind of conversation too, where, like, let's not mess this up, right? But, we want to make sure we don't want the hand that's feeding us to, to be insulted in any way, and, that kind of thing too. So that in and of itself, it's pretty diabolical.
Yeah.
You say.
And we had an episode, I think it was 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, when we interviewed Dea, which talked about how the year in which we were remote has affected the psychology of kids. Them students coming back under conditions where they themselves are masked and shielded and not used to interacting with each other. Teachers feeling fear in relationship to students because of this COVID fear that most teachers have, and are thinking of them as more vectors of disease than about the kinds of things that form relationships. All of those things are breaking apart her school at Everett and making it an unsafe place where fights are breaking out and teachers are leaving or not wanting to deal. And that will also lead people to be like, I got to get out of this in-person brick and mortar education system, and I've got to find an alternative. So, and there's going to be not just COVID or monkeypox lockdowns. There's going to be greenhouse gas lockdowns. There's going to be all sorts of other reasons for shutting things down. There's going to be snowstorms, and that in which we're because of snow, New York and places like that are going to be shutting down for 2 weeks and 3 weeks. We can actually really wait for the snow to go away, and this is already something that's built into it because to me, what you are being put through is really at the heart of what I feel like all this stuff has been about. Like, and that's why it was really interesting to listen to your last episode, where I think you framed it around eugenics, which could be going on still. I mean, I think, we can, But personally, I think this whole transformation of society that we are discussing really just in the aspect of education, because it's happening in telemedicine as well, and in all areas of employment. This is what I think this whole thing has been about. And I do want to actually show a quote, because it was interesting to hear your interview, and I want you to see your interview again, because I asked you a question, and then I'm going to get you to comment on it in relationship to what you're being kind of pushed into, is saying, like, you can't teach here in person, but here we'll offer you this opportunity. And let me share my screen here. Let's see if I can find it. Yeah, here it is. And I just asked you a question about what is that. You had talked about eugenics and COVID, but I asked you kind of what is that dark future you're worried about in education? And this is what you had said.
Okay, the dark future, it's like something where the teacher puts on some kind of 3D goggles or something, and the kids have it as well, and there's no humanity whatsoever. It's just clicking a link or answering a test on a screen, and like in I guess it could be done from almost anywhere, and like I don't know, it just kind of science fiction type thing that I don't think is healthy. I think that we must do what some of these parents are doing in some of the school boards around the country now, like in Arizona and so forth, saying, no, our kids are not going to be wearing the masks anymore. Our kids are going to go back, and we're going to go back without the masks, without the testing, or any of that. It's not necessary.
The reason I wanted to show that is even back then, I think you were aware of where they are trying to take this stuff. And I think we're seeing that in play. And I was contacted by a person who's trying to start a freedom school. And they were like, well, we're looking for a physics teacher, but we can't find one locally. Would you be willing to, like, she's in San Diego, would you be willing to, like, Zoom in and I would, but as I listen to your story and as I see what you're saying there's no future through the vaccine, but unfortunately there's no future through Zoom, and both of those things are traps. And I would help them. I told them I would help them out, but I think even if I did that, we're falling into that same place. I think the thing that is really being broken down here, and you had mentioned it other time in that interview, is the notion of people seeing each other, being in person, experiencing each other. That is what is essential in education. And it appears that LAUSD is well on its way and leading the charge in California towards trying to find a way to do exactly what we feared was coming.
Yeah.
And I just was interested that even back then, I think you had an instinct for that.
I think they want to kill off any spontaneity in the classroom and really just take away that wonderful rogue element that you can get once in a while when the kid asks the right question at the right time, and it takes the discussion off into an area where they really get to know the teacher. The teacher gets to maybe unveil something about him or herself, and debate. I think in this brave new world, real debate, not to win at all costs, but to share ideas and speak freely, that's got to be stifled and squashed. And what better way to do it than, here, watch this video. How do you argue with a video, right? You have to, dig out another video to show that video that's responding to it. It's just killing it off. What would Socrates say? Or what would he ask? The only, right? So It's terrible. What about these old school professors that I'm sure are still around? Maybe Jessica, you can talk about this, right? The old professors that have that same notebook from whatever. Now these guys are probably from 1968 or something, and they know the subject so well. And I remember the lecture hall would be filled, even with people that weren't that particular major. Let's say it was the history of Massachusetts or some special course that the professor taught, and you had all kinds of math majors, science majors. It didn't matter, because if you went to that college, you had to take that guy's course, because before he left this earth, you needed to experience how much this particular professor knew, right? I guess you can watch their videos on YouTube, but it's not the same as the real thing. We need the in-person connection, and they don't want us to have it.
Yeah. But Jessica, do you have any final thoughts or things to ask?
I don't know what I want to say to wrap up. I guess it's good you kept those Animal Farm
Yeah.
sheets, because it does feel very Orwellian.
It sure does.
I don't know. For some reason, my mind's kind of going back, circling to the beginning of our discussion and some of the ways that you talked about. I mean, I know it was in the context of the religious exemption, but I'm curious, just coming at this whole thing from the angle of faith, whether it's Catholicism or, we all have our different sort of spiritual beliefs. And yeah, I mean, I was drafting my own religious accommodation request or whatever the other week. And on the one hand, I felt really, really disgusted at just the idea of having to put that into a form and submit it to some anonymous machine to be graded on a rubric that I can't even see, what the rubric is. I wouldn't give my students a test on something that, I didn't even tell them what the test would be on. So it's obviously really gross, but it was an interesting experience, having to kind of articulate from a spiritual perspective. And I mean, I'm not Catholic, but it actually felt less, the process of writing it, not turning it in, but the process of writing it felt less disingenuous than I thought it would. So I guess, I don't know what question I'm leading up to here, but I guess just maybe to come back to faith as one. I mean, I don't think we're gonna get through this time, let alone create the resistance and the types of education or the communities that we want to create without some degree of faith. And it might be very intersectional in terms of a right wing, left wing, Catholic, Buddhist, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But is that one of the kind of, I mean, that's obviously somewhere that you draw strength from in your life. Does that, I don't know, yeah, faith, hope, what are your thoughts with regard to the future for your students, but also for yourself?
Yeah, I think it is a place where the idea of faith and belief in a higher power, it's something that can bring people together in spite of the world around us and the materialism and the attempt to drive us into the separation. And whenever we have a chance, whether you're Catholic or Buddhist or agnostic, atheist, the quest for the truth is what can bring us together. So people can disagree about things, but when we have a common desire to fight lies, wherever the lies are coming from, whether they're coming from Rome or Washington D.C. or if they're lies, then we need to stamp them out and put the truth out there. So I think faith, for me, it's Catholicism, and it it gives a lot of strength, because I think there's the basis in a searching for the truth. There's not there's nothing there, as long as we have a God-given intellect and we have curiosity, we have this sense that it's okay to question, and through that questioning and even doubting at times, but a sincere and honest drive to understand what's right and what's wrong, just as whatever you might call it. That I think that is a pleasing aspect of what makes our humanity come together and really be one together. It is just too bad that there's so much division that I think doesn't need to be there. And I think that we'll call it the oppressor. I like what you said about calling it the oppressor, or call it the government. They want us to hate each other. They want. Look at Ireland. Protestants and Catholics, at each other's throats, for all of this time. Who benefits from that? That's is look at it. Look at our country here, the black and white divide. And are you kidding me? Can you imagine what it'd be like if we all just looked at who really is the troublemaker? And I think it's the federal government or the corporation or whatever you want to say. I guess I'm just saying that that's the boogeyman, but it really appears to me, and you mentioned that about the right, the left, or Republican or Democrat. I know I feel like Mercutio now, just a pox on both your houses. Forget it. How many times are we going to be suckered in by a party that wants to be number two, wants to be subservient to the Democrats, but yet, oh, don't worry, the midterm elections are coming up. Oh, this time it's going to be different. I said, no, it's not. Not going to be different, because they're I think they're all one and the same at this point. And actually, you guys, I don't trust any of them anymore.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I feel. You tell me, I'm at the point where I've actually thought that I won't vote in the June 7th sham for mayor or whatever it is down here in LA. I haven't even looked at the ballot hardly. And, I think, is it even going to be counted?
Well, you can join us in composting your ballot, as Eduardo is starting his campaign to do.
The new green movement sweeping the country. Compost your ballot.
The thing I wanted to share with you, James, is one, first, it's good to have you on again. But as always, it's really interesting. What are the things so one of the big things that you said that really left an impact on me was when you talked about your church being willing to deliver the host directly on the tongue, as opposed to like throwing the host. And I don't, that's not my religion. Like, I'm not even part of that whole thing. In fact, I have criticisms of these symbols and things like that. But honestly, when you said it, it made me sad in the same way when I thought about people who weren't seeing their loved ones die and were separated from them. It made me sad that is what they've done to people who believe. They've got them to, it's sacrilegious. They've got them to engage in sacrilege in the name of this. out of something that is like, as I understand it, like when it's put a place in the tongue, it becomes the body of Christ, and like that's supposed to, and like you can't throw that thing at people and like put it far away. Like,
Yeah.
what the hell are they doing? And
Well, I'm glad you brought that up. I'll give it a quick Catholic 101. Really,
well,
really brief, but it's if okay. What makes Catholicism and other religions too, like I say, maybe the Greek Orthodox or the Russian Orthodox, is the belief that the host is the body, blood, soul, and divinity of Jesus Christ, and not symbolic. That's what makes, I would say, Catholicism supposed to be different from Protestantism, where many Protestant pastors will call it a symbolism or it's symbolic,
Yeah.
like from the Last Supper. But the what brought us to this particular church is they do the mass in the traditional Latin. One nun at another church who knows my family, she said, "Where have you been?" The church where they give communion in the hand. This other church where my kids had made their first communion, and so the nun said to me, I see your kids sometimes here, but I don't see you that much. How come you guys haven't been coming very much?" And I said, "Well, we go to the traditional Latin mass at this other church." And she looked at me like this and she said, "Really?" I said, "Yeah, we love it." I said, "And my kids love it too." And she said, "Do they know what century this is?" And I thought, okay, good for
Well,
this.
and that's what I'll say about it is it's interesting to me that in 2022, the act of placing that host on the tongue, directly on the tongue, is now an act of resistance.
Yeah.
And that it again is reminding me of like where we're going to find centers of resistance are going to be in places that are going to surprise us. And I also, what was meaningful for me in this episode was to remind myself that we are all trapped in this machine, because you are being trapped to do the very thing that you don't want to go down. You don't want the Oculus, and here you are. But I'm trapped in the same thing with institutional. Like when Jessica mentioned that point of like, okay, there's these bureaucrats who decree your job is now going to be lost. Like they open up this large scroll as they did in the old days, and here's why you're about to lose your job, like they did to me.
Yeah.
But me being part of this system where I'm delivering grades to say you get an A, you get a B, you get an F, I'm stuck and doing a similar thing as well. And it has reminded me, wow, my desire to eventually like to get out of this thing, like to really get into an educational experience with families and students that I actually believe in, because I'm still stuck in something I don't believe in. And it's my job. It earns a wage. I can find it's in person, so I can find some elements of that, but I'm still trapped in it. And so this has really been helpful for me to like just remind myself of kind of unexpected places of resistance, and just to remind myself I need to get out of this thing.
Yeah, it's amazing to see. I agree, and that's how I feel about teaching now as well. You're in this, you're in it, but not of it, kind of thing. And by the way, the church that we go to, it's growing. They actually outgrew the little church, and we have mass under this big tent, and now they actually fill the driveway all the way out to the street with people, with parishioners. It's amazing how it's growing, and to see young families there as well with 3-4 kids and stuff. So I'm sure that'll drive the people in Sacramento. What are they doing?
No, but I'm glad you could take your time to tell us what's going on, and we're going to be talking more about this stuff as well. And I think that's it, because Jessica, you got to get going, right?
Yeah,
I do. Yeah, no, this was really awesome though, and it was cool to meet Thelma for a minute.
Well, I just want to tell you, first of all, but this has just been a real joy for me to connect with you both again, I am I'm humbled. I mean it. I'm humbled that you would call upon me to actually, spend this time. 2 hours of somebody's time is a lot, and hopefully, like we said last year too, if somebody sees it and gets inspired to think about something in a different way, or maybe someone will connect with you again, Andy, and this will keep the ball moving, and more people will join in and so forth. But I want to
Keep
thank
the church growing.
Exactly.
Here we go. Yeah. Amen.
That's right. Hallelujah. Jessica, do you want to go while I do the outro, or you?
You can go. Go ahead. You can do it.
Okay.
I got a match too.
All right, here we go. Thank you, James. And I think somebody is going to hear this, and I think it's going to make an impact. So it was really good to hear all you had to say. Okay, that does it for this week's episode. What's Left is a weekly political podcast channel challenging the mainstream left. We post information about our topics and our guests on the episode notes wherever you found this episode, or on our blog, what-s-left.webnode.com. You can find past episodes to this podcast channel there and connect with us. I remind folks, if you like anything you've heard, please subscribe, rate, review, turn on your notifications, comment to any of our episodes, and to any of our 9 platforms that we're on: Spotify, iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, Bitchute, Odysee, YouTube, Telegram, and Rumble. You can find our blog and any of these links on those episode notes wherever you found this episode. If you'd like to give us feedback about something you've heard or suggest something for us to cover, contact us through our blog. So that's it for today. James, once again, thanks for being part of this episode. Thanks for reaching out. And thanks for doing all you're doing out there fighting mandates in LA. And Jessica, great to have you here. And I guess we'll see each other next week. Although, Jessica, are you going to be here next week?
I think so. Yeah, it's the one after that'll be.
Okay, 2 weeks from now. Okay.
But yeah, we'll talk.
All right. Bye, folks.
Bye.
Thank you, Andy. Thank you, Jessica. Good night.